Brian, Julie, and myself. Thanks for all coming tonight. So, big decision to make in 26. Many of us are out of cash, can't refinance because interest rates are too high. Went through this in the 80s. Then this cycle comes around every 10 to 15 years. Make money, lose money, break even. But recently, the making money window has shrunk. In case you guys don't know, farm income's down. Supposed to be down again this year. Risk is exponentially increased. Inputs don't go down anymore. No more crop share. No more long-term rental agreements. Most rentals are terminated every year automatically. This is staggering. No other business operates like this. 47% of our gross profit goes to inputs. How'd they get so out of control? We've been conditioned to believe that this is the only way. We have to spend this money. They got us. We all know that these prices go up whenever our income goes up. Whatever the market will bear. About 10 to 12 years ago, I had an acquaintance that was higher up in a large nitrogen manufacturer. He shared the formula that they set the price with me. There was a 40% price flex above manufacturing costs and normal margin based on Chicago Board of Trade average corn price. They're never going to let us make too much. There's too few in control, and there's virtually no competition. Here's a fun chart I put together that shows the machine that our money feeds. I tried to include everyone, but I probably forgot somebody. For that, I do apologize. We've got to break this cycle. We must figure out how not to depend on the co-ops, Syngenta, Bayer, and the rest of the cabal for everything. As farmers, we need to take control of our own thinking. We've been conditioned to believe that we've been conditioned to believe, I tell you what, this is what you get for reading it. I usually just come up here and wing it. And that if we don't buy the best corn, spend money on the best seed, the most fertilizer, and don't buy the latest traits, we're missing out on yield. When prices are low, we can't sacrifice yield. And when prices are high, we need the most yield. Success equals how much money we spend. Even worse yet, the neighbor might get a better yield than me. When's the last time anybody's seen a phosphorus deficiency? Have we ever seen phosphorus deficiency out in our fields? How much money do we spend on phosphorus? Do the most expensive seed corn varieties always yield the best? When's the last time anybody's tested the conventional corn number? Is Veltima going to yield 4 bushel better than generic quilt? The last thing you want to do is take monetary decisions or advice from someone selling you something or on our emotions that worry we might be missing out on something. But this is how they market to us. If we want to make money, we're going to have to start cutting inputs without sacrificing yield. We need to learn and look at things a different way. Learning has never been easy for me because I don't listen well, and I must learn everything the hard way. I know this will be a surprise to a lot of you guys. And the last thing today is I don't want to make this about me. This is all about you guys because I've learned more from you guys than I have from anything else over the years. But the story of how I arrived here is similar to others. And hopefully eventually you guys too. If you're going to make a big change in your operation, you kind of have to figure it out on your own and come to your own conclusions. If you come here for me to tell you what to think, you got some pretty serious issues. We're just here to share information and give you a completely different perspective on how we manage our crops. AI is a wonderful tool. It can scrape all the scientific papers, which are almost impossible for a layman to read. We have the most up-to-date information on our cell phones, and we can access as much information as any of the so-called experts. Use it to get recommendations and learn about what we are talking about today. Ask it the right question and choose what sources where we get our information. Using the latest peer-reviewed scientific papers, what is the best pre-emergence herbicide for soybeans?
It's thinking.
Oh,
It's investigating herbicide research.
which one are you on?
Grok.
Oh, my grok's faster than yours.
I have 2 bars.
Oh. You know, it'll eventually regurgitate an answer. But my point is, we've got all this technology at the tips of our fingers. I had a customer this year that we did some leaf tissue tests for. They'll take my word for it. And he wanted a copy of them, and I looked at the, you got the fancy little bars where it's good, bad, or average, and I said they're all good. Well, eventually I sent him the raw data. He sent me back, he took a screenshot of the data, put it into ChatGPT, and it came out with a recommendation that I missed. So I'm like, screw that, I'm just gonna ask AI. They're smarter than me anyway. So, you know, you guys get these soil tests back. If you have any questions, you know, you can take a Snapchat of your soil test and you can ask AI any question you want about it, and it'll tell you. And it's pretty accurate, except if you use it with Stanton's deal. What's it say? Pyroxasulfurone? You don't have the voice one on yours?
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, pyroxasulfurone, metribuzin, and I don't know how to pronounce the other one. So I'll give you guys a little bit of background that don't know me well. My old man, he was always swimming upstream. He was quite an advocate of soil conservation, and he was a little outspoken for any of you that knew him. No-tilled his first field in 1980, and then within 3 years, he switched everything to no-till, 100%, which was kind of quite a consternation for us kids because in the early 80s, we didn't have anything for post-emerge herbicides, and we couldn't use Treflan because we were no-till. So I spent most of my youth on the business end of a hoe. He was proud of his worms and ahead of his time on soil health. He managed to increase his organic matter in the soil by about 1% over 10 years with the corn soybean rotation, his worms, and no-till. The field here, no, Brian, you're fired. This field here, you know, those are about 1%. This one about twice as much. Now that was corn on corn for 4 years with cover crop on it for 4 years. So it does help with organic matter. In the 80s, there really wasn't an option to stay on the farm. So I went to school at Iowa State University, which my little cousin calls the 13th grade. I got a degree in agronomy and entomology, and I went to work for the co-op and spent the next 30 years peddling products. Started a business in 2002, sold it in the fall of 18, then I got fired in the fall of 19. So I went to farming full time. Farming has not been the most successful thing that I have done in my life. I have collected crop insurance 5 out of the last 6 years, and I set a record for dollars spent versus bushels produced. And I lost an ungodly amount of money working my butt off. But I have been trying many different things on the farm and learning about Haney tests, tissue tests, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, and many different products. We learned that it's hard to learn anything from a drought, a flood, and a couple of mediocre years. The biggest project I took on, we seeded down a 53-acre field that didn't produce very good corn and beans. Seeded it down to alfalfa. And I was bound and determined to figure out why corn grows so good after alfalfa. So we grid sampled it with the Haney tests, put it into alfalfa. 2 years into it, we went back, and the guy that grid sampled it, we took him in a foot square, and we went back to the exact same spots. We had everything laid out. I spent $5,000 on the Haney test and learned absolutely nothing, except the fact that the alfalfa ground was pretty much void of potassium, phosphorus, and about all the other nutrients. So in the spring of 23, we finally got enough rain, and Matt actually went out there to plant that field. We were just no-tilling into alfalfa, and there's water standing everywhere. Well, apparently over 3 years of drought, the alfalfa roots were all filled up tile lines. So we're out there unplugging tile lines. I noticed some of the tile lines are pretty deep, and that ground was loose, fluffy, all kinds of alfalfa roots. Thought, maybe it's something that alfalfa's doing down deep that causes these big yield increases. So I decided to do deep Haney tests this year. We switched to Regen Labs, who do a much better job of testing. They give us a lot more information. Thanks to Tom, he said, you're gonna have to switch to Regen Labs. I said, I don't want to. I'm comfortable with where I'm at. But I've done it anyway, and I'm glad we did. Over the years, I've always questioned the conventional wisdom in fertility. But I've eventually accepted it, and I've regurgitated to many of you over the years. But some things always stuck with me. It didn't make sense. I noticed in our ground and others, wherever there was alfalfa, old pasture, cattle lot, that fertility was just always high and yield was always tremendous. They told me, well, it's the amount of nutrients that applied drive yield. Manure has lots of nutrients in it. So lots of manure around the old building site because they all had livestock. Alfalfa puts in massive amounts of organic nitrogen that drives yield. But how does organic nitrogen last 10 years? And I was told old pasture ground, plenty of nutrients in the soil there because we never took any off. This made some sense, so I repeated it for years. There were still things that had me questioning conventional wisdom. Why haven't we ever been able to flatten out our fields on P&K with VRT? There's guys have been doing it for 20 years. And our highs are still high, our lows are still low, no matter how much phosphorus, potassium we dump into those areas. Through the Haney test and things that we're now learning about soil microbe, it appears that this is a deep pool of carbon that releases water extractable organic carbon, which feeds the microbes and provides nutrient to the corn and water from depths in the soil that we understand very little about or never test. Me at that time, Brian. So, talked about carbon. What is carbon? It's very complicated, and we simply don't understand carbon completely. Here's a simplified version of what we do know. Labile carbon is the easily decomposable carbon in soils, organic matter, plant residues, microbial biomass that only lasts weeks to months. Within that labile carbon, there's water extractable organic carbon, or WEOC. This is a carbon that dissolves in water. It's got sugars, organic acid, root exudates, dead microbes, proteins, and this is basically the stuff that all the microbes use for food, and they eat it almost immediately. Once they consume this, they'll release the ammonium that is trapped into this organic matter to the corn. So this is where Julie's going to talk about the Haney test for nitrogen. This is one of the things they look at when they do that test. And recalcitrant carbon. That's the stable carbon in the soil, humus charcoal, humic acid, fulvic acid, years to centuries, better known as soil organic matter. We don't even actually know how soil organic matter is formed. We don't know much about the forms of carbon between the labile and the soil organic matter. But we always know that carbon has driven yield. The higher the organic matter soils are always the best. Which one of these soils do you suppose produces the highest? This was actual dirt taken out of my field about 200 yards apart. So, we all know it's this one. Why? It's black because it's full of soil organic matter. Traditionally, I understood the only way to build organic matter was through slow accumulation of plant residues in soils over centuries. One day I was given on a panel for a cover crop, and this no-tiller stood up and telling me how he grew his organic matter, and I kind of chuckled and said, you really don't grow your organic matter. We don't live long enough to see that. And afterwards, a guy from the USDA came up to me and said, you don't know much about organic matter, do you? And I must have looked at him, he laughed. He said, here, you need to read this study. So he referred me to a study from the University of California in 2001 that produced organic matter by feeding microbes sugar in a lab. Everything I've been taught about organic matter, wrong. So, even after 2 decades, the research in this area continues to advance, and we now recognize that labile and liquid carbon produced by microbes are a huge factor that feeds plants, drives yield, and eventually makes stable organic matter. So one Sunday, I'm standing out in my garden. This was in July. I took this picture because I'd never seen tomato plants 5 feet tall. Squash were huge. The beans were tall and healthy. There was a branch breaking off my apricot tree because it was so full of apricots. I've lived at this house for 25 years, and I have never once seen that field whole. It's got some of the crummiest gravel spots. Along the creek is the crummiest clays. Never been whole. And it was the greenest, most beautiful corn I ever seen. I know that most of the applied end had leached out of that field because of all the rain we've gotten. Why is it so green? My mind was running with many things in my career I could not understand. Why is there no correlation between yield and applied P&K? When I was in college, I talked to Dr. Alfred Blackmere. At that time, he was an individual, probably nobody on the face of the earth back in the 80s and 90s knew more about nitrogen than him. He told me about a study he did, and it was just a simple study. They were trying to determine the right nitrogen rate, and they went from 0 to 200 pounds an acre. In 1 year, the 0 rate was statistically the highest yield, and it was over 200 bushel. And the 200 was the lowest. I saw this when I worked in Calumet. They had a guy that pulling anhydrous. He ran out of anhydrous. Had about a half or 2/3 of a pass left. And he thought, instead of going and get a different tank, he flagged it. And he wanted to see how bad his yield was going to be without any nitrogen. I went out there with the wagon. There was no difference. I'm like, how is this even possible? I mean, at most, they taught me in college, the soil release is 60 pounds of N. No way 60 pounds of N is going to grow a corn crop. So I stood around and looked at all this, and I actually said out loud, I can't do this. I can't make crops look this good. I've spent my whole life shoveling fertilizer, fungicide, insecticides, plant growth regulators, manure, precision planters, no-till, strip-till, cover crops, speed disc, hybrids tailored to your field with the best genetics and the best traits, and I could never make corn look as good as it did this year. None of the things we did this year matter. Everybody's corn looked good. Is it because of the nitrogen that was in the rain? I looked it up. An inch of rain in an electrical storm, we get 9/10 of a pound. That ain't gonna do it. Is it because the rain's just perfect timing? Well, it takes more than water to grow a corn crop. Was it because of the soil? What kind of shape it was in this spring? Was it the temperatures? Nope. It's the nutrients the microbes are providing to the corn this year. They're not only providing balanced nutrients when corn has plenty, they're stimulating growth, they're protecting it from pathogens, and they're doing many other things that we do not understand or know about. Think about it. The microbial activity must be staggering this year as far as the amount of nutrients it's releasing. Corn roots aren't very deep for the most part. They don't go more than a foot in many of the fields I've been in. So my whole focus has shifted from trying to sell products and massive amounts of fertilizer to drive yield to managing the microbes. All the questions that I've had can kind of be explained by the microbes. The high-yielding areas of fields around old building sites. in some of the tests we've done this year with the Deep Haney test. We can see in an alfalfa field that carbon in the top 6 inches is about the same, 36 inches down. You own a crop field 36 inches down, especially an unhealthy one, there's nothing down there. So last year we started a project with a group of farmers using the Haney test. We're mainly using it for nitrogen. And we took tests in everybody's field, and then we shared it with everybody. Most everybody agreed that, you know, you got a list of everybody's tests and your name was highlighted. You didn't know whose tests they were. It's all anonymous data. You could kind of compare and see where you're at in the area, and we could use the data as a pool. And that's how I've always made recommendations over the years. You know, I had the privilege to be able to see everybody's soil tests, right? So I know, you know, sometimes the potassium numbers would come back. They might vary, 80, 90 parts per million between years. So we knew if this guy was usually normally high, then this was a good number. But you wouldn't know that individually by looking at your own. So I thought, well, we can get the farmers together and, you know, kind of let them look at a pool of data and make their own decisions. And the Haney tests, they aren't perfect. They're new. Right now, it's kind of a wild, wild west in the soil testing world. Everybody's trying to develop their own Haney type test. But I tell you, they got it pretty accurate on nitrogen. And that's what we're worried about. And the nitrogen thing's a big game changer for me because I no longer have to use the force to guess how much nitrogen I need to put out in my field. We can take a Haney test in season, see how much nitrogen is available in the soil, and we can alter the rate for a later wide drop application. Go to the next one. You know, right here, just before peak uptake, we're going to take our test, V4 to V6, get the results back, and if we're low in zinc, boron, we can put it in, wide drop it at that point. So I'm going to now hand this over to Julie, and she's going to tell you about the Haney test and some of the stuff that we learned taking them the last couple of years.
Hey everybody, my name is Julie Chalstrom. I don't think I really know any of you very well, so just a really, really quick background about myself. I'm a Gator. I went to the University of Florida. I'm from Florida, and then I got suckered into moving up here because my husband, so, you know, there goes that. But yeah, I got my degrees in soil and water science. I was, as my roommates in college called me, I was the president of dirt for a while. So when Pete threw this job out for me, I was like, I have no idea what a Haney test is, but sure, I'll come help and learn and see what the heck's going on. So what is the Haney soil test? It was developed by Rick Haney, and it does give you all your nutrients, your pH, all those normal kind of numbers, but it's also looking at your nutrient availability and your microbial activity. Basically, instead of just saying, yep, I want a soil test, I need to know my NPK, what's my pH, this test is it is looking more at your soil health in general. You know, if you want just your plain numbers, you can go back to the conventional testing, but this Haney test is digging a lot deeper. It's looking at the condition of your soil, the balance of your soil, you know, what is your carbon to nitrogen ratio so that things can work as best as they can for you. And then it also the Regen Labs does a good job at saying, you know, what can you do to improve your soil? So how are they different? Yep, they both give you your main nutrients and your pH. But how they get those numbers is very different. The conventional testing, they use very, very, very strong acids to get those nutrients out, and then they give you that number. The Haney test uses water. Why? Because it rains water. And then they have also come up with an extractant, and they call it H3A. And I'm not gonna lie, for a while I was like, what is H3A? Is there an A in the periodic table I missed in college? But It's 4 guys' last names, Haney, and I forget the other 2. But basically that extractant is mimicking the soil solution that roots put out in order to get their nutrients. So the Haney test is a little bit more real world, if you want to call it. That extractant has 3 acids in it, and it's in a water. Each is less than 2 grams, I believe. Basically, you could drink it, and it would not hurt you. And then the Haney test is looking at your soil respiration and that WEOC number that Pete was talking about, your organic carbon. So we took a lot of Haney tests this year. Some of you may have gotten your results. So I just kind of wanted to highlight a few things because there's a ton of numbers on that sheet, and what do we really want to focus and look at? So the first one, the soil respiration, and the red circle is just so you can know about on your sheet where that number is. That's measuring how much carbon dioxide is being put out. What they do in the lab, they dry down your soil and then re-wet it and measure the amount of carbon dioxide that comes out for 24 hours. Basically, it's telling you how much your soil is breathing. And this is important because the more it's breathing, the more microbial activity you have. Basically, the healthier your soil is, right? You have a higher potential for nutrient cycling. Your plants are going to be taking up nutrients better. So your healthier plants, what does that lead to? Disease suppression, just higher yield, all good things, right? Averages are around 50 parts per million. This can vary, things like your soil, year to year, is it wet, is it dry, things like that. Other labs are starting to do a soil respiration test because they are seeing how important it is. Their tests tend to go up to, are not the 24 hours that the Haney does, they go up to 4 days. So if you did see some sort of soil respiration number, it would really be kind of like comparing apples and oranges, so just be aware of that. And the WEOC number. Pete kind of touched on this, and when I first started working for him, all he talked about was WEOC, WEOC, WEOC. And I'm like, where are you even seeing this number? What is this? So water extractable organic carbon. Basically the microbe food, what's readily available to your plants. It's not really a measurement of soil organic matter per se, but the quality of that organic matter in your soil. Most agricultural fields, they are between 1 and 300 parts per million. And we did see, we saw a lot that the higher your WEOC number, the better your field is. So what can we do to boost those WEOC numbers? Manure, compost, cover crops, anything to boost that microbial activity. Sorry. And then nitrogen. Obviously, this is the big hitter. The Haney test will give you a completely different number than your conventional test. Your conventional soil test is giving you nitrate. The Haney test is going to give you nitrate and ammonia, and it is also going to look at the release of nitrogen from organic sources. It does assume 4 main, basically you're at least going to get 4 rain events to release that organic nitrogen. So your Haney numbers for nitrogen are higher, just so you know, because it's testing for your sugars, proteins, amino acids, all that microbial food. So in general, here's, Brian put together this graph here, and I know it's not great to see, but you can kind of just see in general, we had great nutrient levels this year, honestly, in the fields that we sampled for the most part. Some things we did see, some fields had a lot of phosphorus, which Pete stole my line. When's the last time you saw phosphorus deficiency in corn? I had to think about it. I was like, wait, what does that look like? I learned it in school, but I don't think I've ever seen it. So, and the phosphorus is the fourth one from the left. So you see that first blue line, that was the 0 to 7 inches. Borderline maybe in some fields having too much phosphorus. If you get too much phosphorus, the plant can actually takes up more phosphorus and not the other nutrients that it needs. So you do kind of want to watch that if you're putting on manure and things like that. And then also, obviously lots of rains this year. We did lose a lot of nitrogen when it was put on real early, and Pete's going to kind of talk about that a little more later, I think. But we were able to see that nitrogen going up as we went down the soil profile. And then again, the higher your WEOC number, the better your yield and the better your field is in general. And I don't know why Pete wanted me to talk about this, but
No, it's my screw up, so you just want to let everybody know.
This is the part of the presentation called We Screw Up So You Don't Have to. So this is Pete's field just out there of the shed. And you can see the height difference in the corn was pretty bad. Had a lot of that 80-mile-an-hour wind those days, blew that corn stover right over 2 rows every 16 rows or so.
16 rows,
yeah. So you can see that was pretty bad, pretty rough on that corn. That carbon to nitrogen ratio was, way out of whack. There was so much corn stalks and corn leaves on the ground that there wasn't much microbial activity. They weren't getting even oxygen. And then coupled with the wet spring and summer, real bad for root growth there. And then,
What was the respiration number on there? I think was 12, which is nearly a dead soil.
And then we did have a few other, not as bad, but bad enough residue problems on a bean field even, where same sort of thing, just that bean stubble covered over a few of the rows. You can see we did some root pulls. Those were able to grow out of it a lot better later season. Corn did eventually make up for itself there. So why do the Haney test, and why do we want to improve our soils? Healthier soils are going to lead to more microbial function, and basically in the long run, that's going to save you money, and that's really the name of the game for all of us farmers, right? So that's all I have, Pete.
Well, way to make me look bad, Julie. You apparently practiced your speech. That residue thing's been driving me nuts for years. I was convinced that there was something in the residue that was the corn residue. So we all struggle with corn on corn, right? I even went out one year, raked up all the residue. I mulched it with alfalfa, mulched it with oat straw. I was just convinced there was something in the residue. And I've been told, that's the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the corn stalks are bad. I said, yeah, carbon to nitrogen ratio of oat straw is the same, but it doesn't cause as many problems. Well, because I could put nitrogen, I still couldn't fix the problems. What I didn't realize that it was sealing off the soil, and no oxygen getting in there, no nitrogen. So I guess we're going to, we bought a stalks devastator for the combine, and some of these corn on cornfields, if they're bad, I may be running a speed disc over them this fall. So now after Julie, we know that she practiced her speech and she's the brains of the operation, so I'll take back over now. Exudates. So what steps are required to utilize microbes to fertilize our crops? And how do these microbes work? Basically, the plant develops a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria and fungi in the soil. The bacteria and fungi mineralize nutrients stored in the soil and deliver it in the plant, who in turn exude carbon. There's a picture of it through a microscope, exuding little droplets of carbon through its roots to feed the microbes. So we want to foster this relationship because the nutrients in our soil are free. Oh, my little thing's not on. I'm trying to record this because I'm not giving this speech again. Guess it doesn't want to go on. So we want to foster this relationship because nutrients in soil are free, and we cannot afford to provide the plant everything it needs anyway. All we do is throw out some macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. Then we tell the plant, all the other micronutrient stuff you got to get, go find it out on your own. Kind of like a diet for us. You know, this is what we're throwing: a little bit of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, maybe some plant growth regulators. Or the microbes provide it everything it needs in balance. And which is going to make a guy the healthiest up there. So we want to do this. The first thing we need to tackle is our current nitrogen management system. Over application of nitrogen suppresses the most important microbes, destroying our soil. High concentrations of nitrate and phosphorus in the soil are taken up directly by the plants, bypassing the mycorrhizal network, which are diverse fungi that provide nutrients to the plant. By getting these nutrients directly by the corn roots, they will not exude carbon to signal the mycorrhizae to bring it to the plant, and it won't develop the mycorrhizal network if the corn plant won't feed it. The mycorrhizal network is just a bunch of threads, and that's what fungi are, threads, extending from the roots farther into the soil to find more nutrients. And I've actually been trying to bypass this system because why would we feed these fungi? Why would we want the plant to expend energy dumping carbon to these fungi when we can just feed it phosphorus and nitrogen and everything directly, bypass the system? Well, yes, this was another one of my how dumb can you get moments. Yes, it does take energy from the corn plant to feed the microbes. 5 to 10% of its energy can go to feeding these microbes. But here's the problem. How do we get potassium, which we're always struggling with, into the corn plant? It's hard to take up by corn roots because it has to go interface with the clay exchange site and pull it directly off of there. How do we get at micronutrients? Because we don't put very many micronutrients on. Who puts on cobalt, copper? What happens when we have a drought? It's got to go find its own water. It doesn't have any help. And what happens when our nitrogen runs out during grain fill? The mycorrhiza hyphae significantly increase the soil area that a particular plant can explore for nutrients and water. For corn, a well-developed mycorrhizal system with hyphae can boost effective root surface by roughly 1 to 200% in typical field conditions, depending on soil type and fungal species. A poorly developed one will only extend it 10 to 30%, potentially reducing yields by 5 to 15%. A well-developed mycorrhizal system can boost potassium uptake by 30 to 50%. And I said earlier, we mostly struggle with potassium. But now you're starting to see where we're going with this. Potassium uptake is 30 to 50% better with the mycorrhizal network, means we have to buy 30 to 50% less potassium than we are today. It also helps with water uptake by improving it up to 50%, with yield increases of 10 to 20% in dry conditions on sandy soil. And you can look all these numbers up. I mean, they're peer-reviewed scientific papers. They've got their materials and methods and everything out there. So I didn't read them. I got them from AI. And the scientific papers are all in the metric system, kilograms per hectare. And That's the nice thing about AI. It'll convert it for you. It'll dumb it down so I can even understand it. And these mycorrhizae aren't anything like our kids. They actually appreciate getting food and work their butt off to get more. Corn plant knows what it's getting from who, and it rewards the ones that provide it the most. It also can signal for certain fungi or microbes to bring it different things, such as micronutrients, your cobalt, your copper. Or it can signal for water when it's dry. Yes, this requires energy, but when things are going well like this year, when the corn plant has plenty of nutrients and water, the mycorrhizae start to do different things for the corn plant, like foster microbial communities around the roots that stimulate growth. They produce hormones that help corn with yield. They produce compounds that deter disease and many other things that we are just learning about. It's just a big contest to see who can make the corn the happiest to get free food. Think about it for a minute. Think about your highest yielding areas in the field. Walk out to them today. They're the last ones to suffer from drought, nitrogen deficiency, disease. Even in these miserable rust fields, you can walk through these fields, you turn yourself orange, you get to these hot spots in your field. There's very little rust there. Why is that? So do you see where this is going? Healthier plants require less fungicides, less insecticides. Think of the energy that the corn feeds the microbes. Like the old saying, you got to spend money to make money. Some of you guys might be thinking, sign me up. What do we got to do? Some of you are probably saying, why in the hell did I come here? So, for the former group, the first thing we need to do is clean up our fertility program. This here is kind of a summary of my fertility program for the last 15 years. We put P and K and anhydrous on 6 months before we even plant the corn. Some of us put UAN on a month and a half before the plant needs it. Why? Because it's easy. Well, we all know the easiest way is not the best way. Why are we putting P and K on high testing ground when we're losing money farming? I have been. I guess I don't want to miss out and let the neighbor out-yield me. Or the fertilizer salesman will tell you, and I guarantee you've all heard this, boy, you know, you cannot put it on, but then it's going to cost you down the road. God, we don't want that, do we? Steps to more profitable soil. And number one, and I'll argue with any on this one, it's got to be nitrogen management. We want a healthier soil. We got to fix the way we do nitrogen. Excess nitrogen does all sorts of negative things to our soil health. It creates nutrient imbalances. Plants can't regulate how much nitrate it takes up. Think about it. In a lot of these manured fields, you'll see this corn gets tall. So it doesn't want to get that tall. They don't have a choice. If there's free nitrate, it's going to take it up. So what's it going to do with it during the vegetative stage? It's going to grow taller. So now all of a sudden we have to take care of this huge plant, and that takes away from grain. And it's kind of the reason this short corn looks like there might be some potential with it, because it's feeding less of a factory up there. Limits calcium, potassium uptake, causing weak stalks. You want to know about what low calcium does to plants? You ask Tom over there. Creates microbial imbalances. Bacteria tend to dominate the microbiome. They love nitrogen, they love phosphorus. And like I said earlier, when the plant's taking up the nitrogen, the phosphorus in the water easily, it's not feeding the mycorrhizal fungi. So the bacteria blow up so bad, they run out of food, so they start eating all the carbon out of the soil. And when they eat the labile carbon, or the water extractable carbon, they got two choices. They can go dig it out of our soil organic matter, and you can look this up. Most of Iowa soils, you add 3 to 3.5% on our organic matters now, and that's what they were before we started working them. And we burnt over 3% of our organic matter. And these are on flat soils. You take these royal soils over here, occasionally a wind will blow them. But, and you can go look, you can go pull a core out of them. We've done it. You pull a core out of a pasture, pull a core out of a fence row, pull a core out of where it's never been farmed. It'll be 3% higher. So these microbes will go into that recalcitrant or soil organic matter, and they'll start digging carbon out of that, which is like taking the screws out of a house. It collapses, so burns it off. Or it's kind of hard to do that, so, or they can go, they'll actually do this. They'll start gathering up all the nitrate so the corn can't get it. So the corn will have to feed it through its roots. And we've seen this with hog manure commonly. I mean, guys that are using hog manure, we're putting like 100 pounds of N out in front of hog manure. I mean, you put 5,000 gallon of hog manure on. The tests say you got 250 pounds of N. Half of it's available this year, half is available that year. They're not testing for proteins, they're not testing for sugars, they're not testing for everything. What do you suppose 5,000 gallon hog manure probably has in it for nitrogen, Tom? 400 pounds? 500 pounds? Yeah. So they'll actually gather up the nitrate, hold it hostage, and this happens early on when it's cooler. The corn doesn't have a developed root system enough to start feeding the microbes, so it turns yellow. And people call me, why is my corn yellow? I got 100 pounds of nitrogen on and 5,000 gallon of hog manure. Well, it's the microbes tying up all the nitrate. Then once the corn root gets developed a little bit, it starts feeding the microbes. They release the nitrate, it greens up, and off you go all the way through harvest, no problems. So what do we got to do? What's the solutions? Well, no nitrogen in the fall. 6 months ahead of time is too early. Go back to looking at that. And cut that growth peak, nitrogen peak use rate curve that's from Dr. Fred Below's speech. Tape it up in your shop and just so you don't forget it. I mean, we got to pay attention to that. Anhydrous has got to go. It kills the microbes, lowers the pH. So I've been using anhydrous. So I started learning this stuff. I'm like, what the hell? And most of you guys have quit using anhydrous. Oh, yeah, it hurts the soil. I guess I didn't get the memo, huh? But anyway, I pulled Haney tests in the row where I had anhydrous the year before. And then I pulled them between the row. And there are no roots between the row, especially in June. My respiration was higher between the row. My organic carbon was higher between the row. My nutrients were higher between the row. So what was I doing? I was creating a dead zone there, right where all my roots are. The only thing I had down there was anhydrous, nitrate. So, yep, it's just a bad idea. No applications of N over 60 to 80 pounds. We do that, we tend to lose a lot less. We don't take away from the mycorrhiza fungi. We don't get the bacterial-dominated microbes. Y-drops first came out, made fun of the Y-drops. Well, the way I'm doing it's better. We're putting it in a disc, we're putting it in soil right between the row. Yep, right between the row where there's no roots. And it can actually volatilize out of those little slits we put in there with the disc just about as fast as it does if you dump it on top. And when you dump it on top on a Y-drop, it's right there where 80% of your roots are. And the dew, the little bit coming off the corn plant, if that soil surface is wet, ammonia and nitrate will go into that soil if it's wet. Doesn't have to have a bunch of rain to take it in. Stabilizers. That might have been, should have been the first one. In a wet year, we lose 30 to 50% of what we put on. Or we lose more than that. Stabilizer can save 30, 50%. High rates of DCD, MBPT, which is a urease inhibitor, keeps it from volatilizing on the top, and high rates of humics. Humics do two things. Humics do help stabilize the nitrogen a little bit, but they stimulate your microbial community, your mycorrhizal fungi, and they can help tie it up too. So There again, distinct phases of nitrogen uptake. We need to put it closer to where we need it. And highly stabilized nitrogen here so it can last to here. We used a product from Red Star that has high rates of DCD and humic acid, MBT in it. What's MBPT cost, Tom, for a grower? Cheap stuff.
Straight NPT,
Yep.
call it $60 a gallon, you use a quart per ton, cheap.
Yeah, what?
20, no more than $20 a ton on your unit.
Yeah, 20 bucks a ton. How much do we put on? Divide that by,
181 gallons of nitrogen in a ton. So put on 30 gallons, cheap.
yeah, I'm talking pennies. What the co-op try to charge you for it? $9. They were charging guys $9 for MBPT. What was it costing? 20, 30 cents? I mean, it's nothing. So same way with DCD. You go by instinct, nitropyrin. What do they charge for that? $9. 12, yeah. No, I was buying it for 9, that was years ago. But so DCD, you know, we can get this DCD soluble powder cheap. So what do do?
And the thing about DCD, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
DCD is actually a nitrogen fertilizer.
Oh,
We just
go
start
back.
chemically to it. So it's not like nitropyrin, which is a manufactured chemical. DCD is actually a fertilizer.
And why don't we use it? Why hasn't anybody heard of it? Because it's off patent and it's cheap. Nobody's going to make any money off of it. But heck, we do things for little or nothing. So this uptake chart, initial growth, we've used 30 pounds of N by V6. So we put enough N on. N-furrow is a great way to do it. You know, you want to go down this road, hate to say it, but liquid systems on planters is going to pay huge. So we put some on early, you know, maybe some on at V6. We get our Haney tests, and the last application we'd make as late as we can. It'll tell us exactly how much we need for the rest of the year. And you get a wet year, a year like this one, a lot of stuff we had came back and so high. Guys are telling me, well, I only put a half rate on. How do I got this much in the soil? Coming out of the soil, coming out of the microbes. So R1 or 80 to 125 pounds of nitrogen we use through here, peak uptake. Late season grain fill we use about the same, 80 to 125. So you can see the bulk of our nitrogen is 90% of it's right there. And we're putting it on clear over that side. So you can change it now, Brian. Oh, more steps. Crop residue, you know, once you learn a little bit about this, the microbes and the carbon in the soil, the absolute worst thing you can do for your field is remove residue. If you have livestock, you go spread the manure back out where you took the residue off. Soil disturbance, tillage. Tillage destroys soil structure, rips apart the areas where the fungi live. Fungi are long filamentous. They're easily destroyed. Bacteria are like little footballs. When you take and you till, especially deep, it puts oxygen, moisture, and carbon from your residue all there, and it starts a fire, and the microbes start fastly decomposing it, which isn't bad. I mean, it gives you some pretty green crops. It gives you a lot of nutrients. It releases a lot faster. Probably better than what we saw on mine, where it just sat on top and stunted my corn, right? But long term, you know, that is not a good way to foster a fungal type microbe is a lot of tillage. So you do both in tandem. You do tillage and throw 120 pounds of N with it, and it's like throwing gas on a grass fire. It blows up, and we've seen it in some of our tests. It blows up the respiration like you can't believe, but it's all bacteria. And when that happens, you know, the bacteria that start to dominate are called denitrifiers. And denitrifiers are the ones that cause the nitrogen to go up into the air if the water gets saturated. And some of them just feed off the oxygen on the nitrogen anyway, turn into nitrous oxide. So, and we all know the higher the nitrogen we put on, the more nitrogen we put on, the better chance we have of losing it because of that. So, shallow tillage, not a big deal. It actually might help some. Get the residue incorporated so it doesn't create a mat, cut off the oxygen for the plant. UV light hitting soil kills pretty much all the microbes in the top 2 inches anyway. So shallow tillage, not a biggie. Diversity is going to be a tough one for some of us, you know. Corn, soybean, corn, soybean, corn, corn, corn is not very diverse. And, you know, when we can throw in another crop or do something different, it makes a big difference. Residue management, we talked about that. We got to manage the residue. Strip freshener, planter attachments, tillage. Another big one is, you know, stimulating the microbes too. Get them working, put a little nitrogen on maybe. We have these digesters, the residue breakdown digesters. And when Tom comes back and asks him about those, he's been working on those for decades. Another thing I used to make fun of, I've used them. I put a flag out, we spray them on, and I sit there after I plant and I stare at the flag, see if I can see any less stalks or more stalks on this side or that side. Now, that's not really how they work. We're talking about the breakdown, Tom, residue digesters. So there's been several scientific papers out on them. They're doing something else rather than just, then they do help break down the residue. And they do it from within. They turn it to another form where a lot of the lignin and cellulose that's in there, the microbes in soil won't eat that. So you got to have something working in them stalks too. And so that's a big thing. We're going to be testing a lot of that, you know, and we'll go to the end here and you'll see how we're going to do all this. So, moving on, pH, microbes per 6.5 to 7.5. Why on earth the universities all went down to 6, I don't know. But we got to get that fixed. Use old soil test. I've got a deal worked out. We can just test for lime or just test for pH, pretty cheap. 4-acre grids is usually sufficient for that. So if you need pH testing, but we need to get the pH fixed. Zones, they maybe should be higher. Again, why are we treating these two soils the same, John? So we looked at these Haney tests and they come back. You take it on, and this was pretty much really what happened out here. This would have had 20 to 30 pounds available in, and this had 90. But we've always put the same amount on both. So and I don't understand them real well. I haven't talked to the guys, but they use this new program with topography, percent slope, bunch of calculations that, I don't know. I'll learn more about it, but apparently it's pretty good at determining, you know, where your good and your bad soils are. A lot of you guys probably got zones. You make them by yield, whatever, you know, they all work. Soil type. This other thing might be a lot better than soil type, but we're going to dig into it. It's not very expensive to make these zones. And then you have permanent zones. And when we do these Haney tests, we take them out of these zones. So if you got a zone 7 and you got a zone 7 over here, we can kind of say, well, if this zone 7's testing this, we can extrapolate that one's going to be the same. So we can use it for population, all kinds of other things. So soil amendments, manure, preferably high carbon manure, humics. Every time I go across the field, as cheap as they are, we're going to be putting humics on. Humics, basically stable organic matter. So you dump that in the soil, it stimulates the microbes, helps feed the plant. When I was standing out in my garden, I was having my epiphany. I started texting Tom. I'm like, we need to come up with a starter we put in with the planter. It's got humics, it's got sugar, maybe some amino acids for nitrogen, and then, maybe some others, a little bit of zinc or something. And Tom's like, got it. I'm like, oh, you got something like that? He said, well, how long, you got any data on it? Well, 7 years worth, yeah. So, we're going to be trying that stuff out. So apparently I don't read the brochures you give me very well. Or your emails, yeah. Well, hey, that's like I said earlier. We got to figure this shit out on our own. You can't have anybody tell you to use this. You got to figure it out. So you got to manage your phosphorus too. Cover crops do some wonderful things. I'm not going to talk much about them because we're in the middle of doing that right now. And I tell you what, I would probably rather have my wiener in a pickle slicer than deal with those things some days. So moving on. Yeah. So this is some maps. This is what we actually did this year in a couple of my fields with variable rate nitrogen with these Haney tests. This one here, we had along that road where they scraped off of the road, it's always been a bugger, so we put the full rate there, and then I extended into the field. We did the Haney test, and then we left the strip. So we're going to have, I would normally put on 30 gallon. This one ended up getting 23 is an average rate. And this one over here ended up getting 14. And where all that orange was, that didn't even call for any nitrogen. But I still put on 8 gallon because I didn't have the cojones to not put anything on there. So, and I can see a few holes, but I walked through there, I can't see any difference in the corn. It's green as a gourd. That field had, between the fall anhydrous and the spring strip till, I had 155 pounds of anon. So some of that's only got like 65 pounds of anon, corn on corn. Would have been less if I wouldn't have put so much up front. So, well, you guys can read about this. So what's the numbers? Well, in increasing your WEOC number 100 to 200, it's not that terribly hard, and you're looking at, again, these are studies, 10% savings on fertilizer. That's considerable. What do we spend? $200? So, go to the next one. Here we go. That's something to think about. And these are real. I mean, we've known a lot of this for years. This is in the top 30 inches. So I've extrapolated it down to the, effective rooting zone of corn. 2,000 to 3,000 pounds we can pull out of that soil, and it's not hard. I mean, some of it's attaches ammonium to the clay exchange sites, but a corn root can get that off just by interception. Why don't we do more of it? Well, because we put enough nitrogen on, we don't have to go after it. Now, you guys are thinking, oh God, Pete's going to tell us we have to put fertilizer on. Well, you don't. I mean, there's guys out there not putting fertilizer on, but they're using all that stuff. But the problem is they're making 120 to 150 bushel an acre. That's not going to pay them any bills. But if we can get the first 100 bushel from the soil, and all of a sudden we're just putting removal rates on for 150 bushel instead of 250, right? So phosphorus, and I don't know if any of you noticed your phosphorus levels are going up. And that's because the labs are changing their extraction, number one, because back to the never seen a phosphorus deficiency. We've been over fertilizing on phosphorus. And that 400, 860 pounds is quite easy to get out of the soil, isn't it, Tom? Mineral portion, pretty tough, but there's up to 4,000 pounds. Look at these potassium numbers. How the heck are we having problems with potassium? Like we talked about earlier with the mycorrhizal network. And guys, I've talked to people. Tom's stood in fields. He's worked with guys that have been doing this sort of stuff. And it's kind of amazing what they're getting by with and their yields and how they can wean themselves off of a lot of fertilizer by using this stuff. So, all right, call to action. Got to take some action now. So, we've been doing tons of testing. We got a $20,000 portable leaf tester. We're doing hundreds and hundreds of tissue tests. We've done sap tests. We've done Haney tests, all in the same area. We got Brian sitting behind a computer trying to run them through AI to make correlations, to see if there's correlations between these three tests, what we should be using, what's working, what's not. So yeah, we figure all this stuff out. We're going to get the guys together that have been on this program this winter, share all the results we got with it. And one of Julie's many jobs is coordinating and taking field observations for all the data on some of the regular tests we're doing. Doing population studies, testing all kinds of products. We got some of this finish line out there we've been testing. And, you know, you can participate in that if you don't even want to do the Haney tests. So, looking at a lot of biologicals. Some of the stuff we're seeing with these new biologicals is just crazy. We met with some of these cats from UPL this summer, and they've been using these things over in Europe for years. And this year I've seen a rootworm-eating nematode outperform a VT4 Pro. A biological fungicide won our fungicide plot, and I just had Matt dump it in the tank to get rid of it. And we're working with these endophytic nitrogen-producing microbes, some seaweed extracts that are supposed to increase the nitrogen efficiency of corn. The strips were green, we'll see this fall, but we've got, I don't know how many of these tests we got out on the beans. 4 or 5, yeah. Corn, we got a couple. So, you know, our plan is to use AI to correlate these Haney tests, analyze patterns. You know, maybe someday if there's enough correlation there, we take all zone 7s, we take 5 or 6 samples out of zone 7, we can say, hey, this is how much nitrogen you got, even if you didn't take a test. We'll use the group data to look at if you get a test bill that says, I got 120 pounds of available N in zone 4, and hell, everybody else is calling for a bunch of nitrogen, we might say, maybe that test ain't right, or Pete messed up the sample or something. So it kind of protects us from making errors too, you know, and we can look at a mass of data. So, you know, we're just, you know, we're gonna get a whole bunch of testing information on your guys' farms. It's your own data. You share it. You learn on your own, and you know, that's kind of what we're gonna do. So, yeah, this next year we're gonna have access to some Hagies to do some Y dropping. We'll do some custom application this year. We're not gonna overextend ourselves. A lot of guys are going to be worried about, you know, putting all your nitrogen on that late. We've been here before. We can get planes in. We can put stabilized urea on with planes. It'll get put on. So, well, thanks for your consideration and showing up tonight. So, yeah, any questions about the Haney test? You can ask Julie. AI, you can ask Brian. Humics, all the stuff, you can ask Tom. If you want to hear childhood stories about me, you can talk to me.
We don't need them after that.